Welcome back to Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership podcast. We are in season 5 and our listenership is continuing to grow. We are in 87 countries and growing. And Bofta, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So last year we decided to go video because my team always pushes me out of discomfort. So your biography and all of your socials and everything about you is below in the episode description because I want to spend the next 30 minutes interviewing you and bringing out the greatness so our listeners can see what you are putting out in this global world today. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan. I love it.
All right.
I love it.
Okay, I'm going to start with my first leadership question.
Yeah.
Your leadership journey has been filled with courage and storytelling. How do you see the connection between storytelling and heart-centered leadership?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the connection lies in that's what people relate to. So if you're a leader out there and you're looking to engage, be it your employees or an audience that's in front of you and you're on stage, storytelling helps people relate to the message, whether that's a lesson that you learned, whether it's the values within your company. But anytime you can share a story, it helps people connect the dots. And so when we work to connect the dots as leaders, what we're really saying is this message is so important. I want to make sure that everyone gets it. And I want to make sure that I engage as many of you as possible so that it's relatable. And a really good example of this I'll touch on very quickly is I have a client who's in the workforce development space. And, before we started working together, he's like, I just don't know how to tie in my story. And he leads now 50 employees and he was planning this big conference. And I said, you've got to talk about how you are a product of a workforce development pipeline as an immigrant who came to Baltimore when you were 16 years old and entered into a $1 billion company. You got to tell that story, right? And then he found another story within that I didn't even know about. I'd been talking to him, but I didn't know about. So we want to look for the threads and the layers so that we are relatable, be it, a $25 million workforce development company or someone who's doing a startup. It doesn't matter if you have one VA. And most importantly, I think, Deb, what it does is it really reminds ourselves that it's been a journey and we want to share that journey. We're not promised to be here forever on earth. Let's share the stories so that other people can benefit and we can have impact.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, number one, I loved your submission and I loved how you filled out our form. And I don't know, there was something about your words and your passion came through. Because we get a lot of requests, I'll be honest.
I'm sure.
And, when I started my company at 24 and I'm turning 59, so I'll let you do the math, I was told there was no space for this. And my Irish Nana, today is her birthday. She used to say to me, you can always control you.
Yeah.
So connect, like you said, connect those threads, line up the dots, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what verbiage or how it's coming out for you. When someone else knows that you can step into their space and you share that meaningful alignment, there's no data or AI that's ever going to touch that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I love the way you answered that. Okay, second question. As a journalist and a speaker, you've mastered presence and authenticity. We love talking about authenticity on the show. How do you encourage leaders to show up with the vulnerability while maintaining their strength?
I think that's tricky sometimes, right? Because if we haven't done the work, and I mean the personal work, we can end up like bawling, a ball of tears because we haven't done the work. And I say this from experience, right? We have to do the inner work before we can really show up probably how we want to show up. And it's not what people want to hear, right? Because that means that you have to take time and space and potentially invest in whatever it is you need, be it a coach, a therapist, a counselor, right? Whatever it might be. But we've got to do the inner work first. And I think a lot of people try to skip that step. And then when they try to be authentic, it doesn't come off authentic. It comes off sometimes as cringeworthy, or it comes off as, oh, I don't really believe or trust this person. So I think we have to show up as ourselves. I have a joke. It's kind of unrelated, but I was talking to my hairdresser. I was doing like a party for my small, little toddler, and she said, "Well, just do this and that for food. Just do this and that for food." And I said, "That's really off brand for me." I was like, I want to like cook the pasta for all 50, 60 guests, and I want to like make the fish and do all the things because that's me showing up as me, right? And that's a different example than business and leadership, but I remind myself sometimes, I'm like, the reason why I like to do something like that is because it's on brand for me. Like, that's who I am. So we use the word branding a lot, right? We hear it like a million, million times, but it's just who I am. It's how I like to show up. And so, I will do a balance, right? I'll have pizza and I'll have the heavy duty stuff that I'll probably cook, but that's what I like to do, right? And so it comes off authentic. And that's because people who know me would know that about me, right? And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes what we try to do is we try to pretend we're one way or the other, and then we're like kind of miserable about the decision.
Yeah, and what
Again,
I'm
have to
a
own it.
fellow foodie, so, like, I get
Yeah.
that, like,
Yeah.
that's my love language, like, if you come to my house, I wanna cook for you, I wanna know what all your favorite dishes are, and
Yeah.
just the tablecloth, the na like, all the
Yes. I want all the details.
it's
Yeah.
it's so
Exactly.
important because it's like, "Wow, somebody's really pampering me, and this is
Right.
lovely." Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that.
Right. So yeah,
Okay,
and that's
we got another
for you.
alignment, food, yeah.
I know. I know. I know. I'm coming over. Like what time?
But that's really beautiful, like, I really respond to that because I am the same way. Yeah, you can do the pizza and the veggie
Yeah.
tray and whatever, but like you said, you wanna cook the fish and the pasta.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I just wanna do all the
it's
things.
nice plastic.
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh, that was so," and it's fun for me, but for somebody else, it might feel like more work, but for
I'm
me, it's like,
saying
"Oh, I get joy from it." And so somebody else might look at us and say, "You guys are over the top," but that's how God created me to be. Like, that's
yeah,
what gives me joy, right? So
yeah.
it's like, if I resist that, I'm not very happy. I'm like, "Oh,"
My sister-in-law will come over and she'll look at my table and she'll go, "Oh my god, like, that looks like it's out of a magazine, like, you
Yeah,
have to do all this." And I
right.
said, "This is pure joy for me."
Yeah, I love it. I love
Right?
it.
So
I
I
spent,
get
like, a
that.
whole day, like,
Yeah.
for 6 girlfriends who came, over last fall, and we were on the deck, and I spent a whole day, like, a whole Friday preparing for this dinner, and you know what they said when they came over? 2 of them said, "I can't remember the last time I had this much of a home-cooked meal." And I was like, "Wow, I feel so touched." I didn't do it because of that reason, but, I enjoyed it, and they did too. It made me feel good, so
Well, it's the corporate hustle. Like
yeah.
I want to jump off that. And I used to
Yeah.
travel a lot when I was in the medical world and my coping as a mother with 2 young girls was we would come home and we would unpack the groceries and how was
Yeah.
your day and they would help me. And it's so fun now cuz my girls are 27 and 29 and I'm now a grandma.
Yeah.
My girls are such great cooks, and it's not a chore. It's an
Yeah.
enjoyment, and I think that's a cool legacy. And now my granddaughter cooking and baking, and it's fun,
Yeah,
and
it's
you're
fun.
sculpting them to learn, right? So
Yeah.
I think food brings us all together. Have a whole podcast on food.
I know. Like I said, I'm coming
Over.
over. I gotta get to Canada somehow, some way.
Okay, leadership question number 3. You help people elevate their visibility.
Yeah.
So, explain to me how you use emotional intelligence to play a role in the way leaders can amplify their stories and really get to that inspiration you were just alluding to.
Right. And I think when people hear emotional intelligence, they're like, oh my goodness, I have no idea how I would talk about that in a piece of LinkedIn content, right? It sounds overwhelming to a lot of people, and I understand that. But I think the real thread here is for your listeners to think about what are some themes that showcase um, pieces of your journey. Because I guarantee that there's emotional intelligence layered into that.
Mhm.
Maybe it was the way you bravely showed up to an interview that you did not think you were ever going to get, right? And you showed up and boom, boom, boom happened, or you didn't get it, right? And so then you learned I have to keep trying, and so that perseverance becomes the theme. But there's emotional intelligence in all those things because we're not all like gifted in emotional intelligence. We have to do some work, like we talked about before, some inner work to learn what are our strengths, what are our gaps. So, do you have empathy? Do you lead with empathy? And so that's the emotional intelligence that I think if you can thread some of those layers and think of stories tied to themes. So I like to keep things simple. Stories tied to themes. And if the theme is courage and the theme is empathy, or the theme is bravery, or the theme is vulnerability, you can talk about what some of the challenges or some of the really amazing things that have happened through that journey. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's that external trusted partner looking in or helping you sit in the observer's chair and go, wow, I didn't even realize after sharing this with you that you've seen these themes. And it's kind of
Right.
like, without sounding cliche, like they're having their own little aha moment.
Yep.
But when someone's really looking at, like you said, the journey, and there is a pattern, and sometimes we don't know what the pattern is.
Right.
So I love that.
Yep.
Okay, my last leadership question is, leaders with heart require resilience. I can
Hmm.
tell you that for sure. Can you share a moment where you had to overcome your own self doubt or an external
Oh
challenge
God, yes.
while staying true to your mission? Entrepreneur to entrepreneur.
I'm like, how many examples do you want? Oh my
You
goodness.
know what? What's the first one that's top of mind for you?
Right. So, I mean, the first thing that came to mind, and we were kind of laughing off camera because I was saying I have so many examples of when I think a lot of people would have given up. And I just kept going. I don't know really what was inside of me because it's kind of half crazy sometimes when I think of some of the things. But the first example that came up for me was that, I am certainly a journey, a work in progress like all of us are. But sometimes people think that getting on camera and, being able to articulate your points, that it happened overnight. And it hasn't been. And I stress that as much as possible because I want everyone to realize like this is the result of hours and hours and hours and hours of right of working to mastery. And I'm not saying I'm a master, but I put in
Yeah.
a heck of a lot of time into it. But when I was applying for my first on-air job and I wanted to be a news reporter, and I had taken a break after college and gone to Ethiopia, which is where my parents were both born and raised. And I took time off to do that, and that was very personal and very intentional, and I wanted to spend 6 months there, and I wanted to get better at the language. It was a very personal journey. When I came back, it was really hard to get, um, my foot in the door because I'd taken that break, and I think I just didn't have some of the practical skills that were necessary at that time. Things have changed. Um, not dating myself. So, I applied to more than 100 TV stations. And back then, there weren't links. You took your VHS tape of your resume reel, hopefully, it was a really good reel, and you went to the post office and you physically mailed it out. And I did that 100 times, more than 100 times. And all I would get, sometimes I get a letter, thanks for applying. Usually I heard just radio silence, right? Nobody's responding to you because they have 200 resumes, 200 VHS tapes that they're going through, even for a very small, tiny market. And so I was feeling discouraged naturally, and I was just, working odd end jobs. I was living at home, contributing where I could, and then I decided to do an unpaid internship again after college, unpaid internship. So I went to Harrisonburg, Virginia, which was about 2 hours from where I lived. I would drive there on a Monday, drive back on a Wednesday, and then like wait tables Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I would just do that for an entire summer. And I thought, I got this. I'm in the door. The news director likes me. I've been working hard, and sometimes we get married to the idea like this is going to happen because like I did all this work. But life doesn't always work out like that. The news director ended up fired, let go. I don't even know what the story was. So I then didn't know the incoming person that well. And there were no openings. So I just like went right back to, I felt like back to zero. I'm like, great. But then what I realized was that sometimes you meet people within the journey that are there to give you that supportive hand. And I met the anchor there, Melanie, who befriended me, was like helping with my video reel, all of that good stuff. And she referred me to her first job and said, would you be willing to go to Georgia if, they have an opening? And I was like, yeah, I'll go anywhere. Like I will do whatever it takes. And so she said, okay, I'll introduce you to Calvin. And so I told Calvin that he was in a small town called Dalton, Georgia. It was an independent station. I was so hungry, Deb. I was so hungry that I said, hey, I'm going to be in Atlanta visiting friends. Would you mind if I just stop by the station? There is no stopping by. It's 2.5 hours north of Atlanta. I got to rent a car. And he's like, sure, come on. Because it cost him nothing to have me just come there and say hi, right? It was smart. So I went out there, met him for an hour or so. And then he's like, okay, have fun in Atlanta. Meanwhile, he didn't know. I was just like driving right back, flying on that plane back home. And so he didn't have an opening. But what it did was that in person, the power of being in person and all of that resilience and perseverance paid off because 8 months later, there was a job and I got it. And I was in that small town making $15,000 a year and found a way. I was not given a silver spoon. I, figured it out. I waited tables again on the weekends. So I was like on air and then I would take off my, uniform or whatever that I was wearing that day and then put on my apron and go wait tables. And they're like, didn't we just see you on the news? I'm like, yep. What do you want to drink?
Awesome.
So I think that's an example for me of resilience. That's one of many. And by the way, I repeated that tactic, that strategy when I got my job in Memphis about 4 years later. Same thing. Told them I'll be in town, drove
And
10
you
hours.
know what I love the best about that story? I think we've all been servers, waitresses, bartenders.
Oh, yeah.
And the skills that we take from that, I think, serve us for our whole life.
Yes. Yes.
That's
And
a
I waited
great
tables
story.
throughout college. Throughout college, I waited tables. I mean, it helped pay my way through college. So,
Absolutely. And we've
yes,
learned how
true.
tenacious you are and strategy.
Well, like I knew when I went into business, I was like, well, I can hear a no. So, like,
Yeah,
that's fine.
no just means they're not on right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a great story. Okay, I'm
Great,
going to
please.
switch to my fun questions.
Okay.
And we just want what's sitting top of mind whenever you hear the question, whatever you think.
Okay.
If your leadership style was a headline in a newspaper, what would it say?
Empathy wins.
See? She's prepared. Look at that. You've reported on history in the making. If you could time travel to any historical event to cover it live, where would you go and why?
Wow. Oh, whoa. You're coming out with the big guns. Oh.
I'm lending you my free time travel vehicle. Where are you going?
Oh,
What's
my
happening?
goodness.
Who are you interviewing? I know exactly where I'd go. I'll share with you when you're done.
Yeah, I would probably like to interview Michelle Obama. I didn't interview her, but I would like to interview her. So let's put that in the universe.
I would have loved to have met Nelson Mandela.
That's a good one too. Wow.
And
Mhm.
I'm a yoga teacher, so I'm gonna help you put that intention out that you're gonna meet Michelle.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet her. I've
I
seen her.
throw Maya Angelou out there too. That would have been nice.
She was
Yeah,
amazing,
neat.
wasn't
Yeah.
she? Yeah. Okay. What's one storytelling technique that unexpectedly applies to everyday life? Maybe you even have a fun or quirky habit that you could share with our listeners.
So I don't know if this is a daily thing, but I think it's one that everybody could implement right away. And that's to think of transformational moments. So going from this to that, so I went from $15,000 a year in as my salary to making $15,000 for a 15-minute speaking engagement. Right? So I think anytime you can show transformation, you pique the curiosity of the listener. And so that could happen from what you've gone through, from mental health to um, caretaking to your career journey to being an entrepreneur, right? It literally transcends. So depending on the season. So think of seasons of your life and then think of transformational moments within them and just go from this to that. By the way, for everyone listening, that's great for your bio as well. If you're like, how do I sum up all that I've done? So from being a police crime beat type reporter to the White House, whatever it might be, right? And I'm coming up with stuff. But that tells people a lot happened in between without saying every single detail because we don't have the bandwidth to keep up.
That's a great tip. Okay, final question. If your journey as a storyteller and leader were turned into a movie, who would play you and what would the title be?
Oh my goodness, who would play me? Well, on a fun note, I always get told I look like Tia and Tamara. So I don't know if they would play me. But who would I want to play me? I think Angela Bassett would be so much fun. I just think of
Yeah.
her as just like
Yeah.
this cool,
Yeah.
bad chick. You know what I mean? So I feel like she's got some fire in her. So the
I was
first guy was
gonna say
actually,
Halle Berry.
oh, God bless you. Oh my goodness. God bless you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just take that with me for the rest of my life that you
You
sound
can.
that?
And what's the title of the movie?
The title of the movie would be Get Bold or Get Out. Something like that. I don't know.
I think your energy is infectious, and
You.
I'm happy that you wanted to be on the show, and I love what you're putting out in the world and how you're helping people. And I'm going to let you close out the show with a quote or just one last anything that's on your heart that you want to say to our listeners. You get the last word.
I heard this 2 weeks ago from someone unrelated, nothing to do with business, and it stuck with me, and she said I was in the middle of a decision, a pretty tough decision, and she said, "You know, life, this is not a dress rehearsal. Like, this is it." And I think that puts things in perspective very quickly. We think that, oh, if I don't do this, then it's fine. But no, if it's on your heart and you want to do it, you better go for it because and no pun intended, I know it's a heart-centered leadership podcast, but it's like if something's really in your heart and you are feeling pulled in that direction, just like I was in being an entrepreneur and being a speaker. I mean, that took a lot to go from working so hard in a career to then also making that pivot. And so I think what she said reminded me, like, no, this is all we got. Like, when your time's up, your time's up. And I like thinking about it that this is not a dress rehearsal. So are you happy with the way things are playing out? Because if you're not, business or otherwise, then you've got to make a decision and make a change. Otherwise, it's not going to go well for you. You're going to look back. And the other one I'll share, which I recently heard, and I know I'm only allowed one, but I'm going to cheat and say two, because it's too good, is you're accountable for everything. You are 100% accountable. So if you don't like what's happening in your business or something else, it's 100% on you. And so that allows us to not be the victim in our own story, in our own movie. As you put it, if I had to put a movie, I would never want to come out thinking I was a victim of anything. Like I chose all these decisions, making little money, moving to Georgia in my Honda. I chose that life, and it paid off. But I made sacrifices too that I have to also live with. But I made those decisions, and so I think just being 100% like this is the life I created. Am I happy with it? And I think for those two quotes, you get some perspective pretty quickly.